Ambassador Kira Vance had dreamed of this moment her entire life. She stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, surrounded by beings from 17 different worlds. The room was massive, built from crystals that glowed with soft blue light. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds actually formed near the top. This place was older than human civilization, older than the pyramids, older than anything humans had ever built. Kira took a deep breath and looked around at the alien faces watching her. Some had scales, some had fur, some looked like insects the size of cars. Others were made of living light or flowing water held in shape by invisible forces. Each one represented a species that had traveled the stars for thousands or even millions of years, and today, humanity was joining them. "We welcome the humans of Earth into the Galactic Council," said High Arbiter Thesson. He was a tall creature with a hard shell like a beetle, and 4 arms that moved in strange patterns when he spoke. His voice clicked and buzzed, but the translator in Kira's ear made his words clear. "You are the 18th species to earn this honor." Kira smiled and bowed her head in respect. "Thank you, High Arbiter. Humanity is honored to take its place among the stars." The ceremony continued for hours. There were speeches and traditions and rituals that Kira did not fully understand, but she played her part well. She had trained for years for this moment. Every word she spoke had been practiced. Every gesture had been planned, but something was wrong. Kira had studied the council carefully before coming here. She knew there were supposed to be 18 seats in this chamber, 17 for the existing species and 1 for humanity. But when she counted the occupied seats, she only found 16 species present. 1 seat was empty. The empty seat was different from the others. It was not made of crystal like the rest. Instead, it seemed to be made of pure darkness. Light bent around it in strange ways, as if the chair existed in a place slightly outside of normal reality. After the ceremony ended, Kira approached High Arbiter Thesson. The other ambassadors were leaving the chamber, talking quietly among themselves. But Thesson remained, watching Kira with his compound eyes. "High Arbiter," Kira said carefully, "I noticed that 1 seat was empty during the ceremony. May I ask which species was absent?" Thesson's mandibles clicked together in what the translator called discomfort. His forearms twitched. "The Velthrani," he said after a long pause. "The oldest ones. They were the first species to travel the stars. They were building empires when my ancestors were still swimming in the oceans of my homeworld." "Why did they not attend?" Kira asked. "Are they upset that humanity is joining the council?" Thesson made a sound that the translator could not identify. His body language suggested fear. Actual fear. "The Velthrani have restrictions regarding your kind," he said. "They will not come near your solar system. They will not meet with your people. They will not speak of you directly. This is their choice, and the council respects it." Kira frowned. "Restrictions? What kind of restrictions? Have we done something to offend them?" "No," Thesson said quickly. "Too quickly. You have done nothing wrong, Ambassador. The Velthrani are simply cautious. They have their reasons. Ancient reasons. Please do not ask me to explain further." But Kira was not the type to give up easily. Over the following weeks, she asked every ambassador, every diplomat, every scientist she could find. She wanted to know about the Velthrani. She wanted to know why they avoided Earth. No one would tell her. The Kethmori ambassador changed the subject every time she asked. The Scythian trade minister pretended not to hear her questions. The Orvex military commander actually left the room when Kira mentioned the Velthrani name. Everyone was afraid. That much was clear. But afraid of what? The Velthrani? Or something else? Kira tried a different approach. She requested access to the council's historical archives. She wanted to learn everything she could about the Velthrani on her own. But when she searched for information about Earth or the Sol system, she found nothing. The records had been deleted. Or hidden. Or perhaps they had never existed at all. She tried to request travel coordinates to the Velthrani homeworld. The computer system crashed. She tried again the next day. The system crashed again. On the 3rd attempt, she received a message from an unknown source. The message contained only 2 words. "Stop looking." But stopping was not something Kira knew how to do. She began paying attention to small details. The way other species looked at humans. The whispers that stopped when she entered a room. The strange expressions on alien faces when Earth was mentioned. One night, she was attending a diplomatic dinner with representatives from several species. The conversation was friendly and light. They discussed trade routes and cultural exchanges and scientific cooperation. But then a young Orvex officer made a joke about visiting Earth someday. The room went silent. Every alien in the room stopped moving, stopped breathing. They stared at the young officer with expressions of pure horror. One of the Keth Mori diplomats actually dropped her drink. The glass shattered on the floor. But no one moved to clean it up. "What?" the young officer asked, confused. "What did I say?" An older Orvex grabbed his arm and pulled him away. "We do not joke about such things," she hissed. "Never speak of visiting that world. Never." Kira watched this happen with growing confusion and frustration. What was wrong with Earth? What made her homeworld so terrifying to species that had conquered the stars? She finally found a small clue 3 months later. It came from an unlikely source, a cleaning robot in the archives. The robot was old and damaged, and its memory banks contained fragments of deleted files. Kira spent hours piecing the fragments together. What she found made her blood run cold. The Velthrani had not visited the Sol system in over 3 billion years. 3 billion. Before life on Earth had even crawled out of the oceans. Before the dinosaurs. Before almost everything. And according to the fragments, the Velthrani had made every other species swear an oath. A sacred promise passed down through countless generations. The promise was simple. Never go to the third planet of the Sol system. Never dig too deep. Never ask questions about what lies beneath. The file ended with a single phrase, repeated over and over like a warning or a prayer. Let the sleeper dream. Let the wound heal. Let the children forget. Kira stared at those words for a long time. The children. Were they talking about humans? Were humans the children who had forgotten something? She saved the file fragments to a secure device and hid it in her quarters. Then she began planning her next move. Somewhere in this galaxy, someone knew the truth about Earth. Someone knew what the Velthrani were so afraid of, and Kira was going to find them. That night, she lay in her bed and looked out the window at the stars. Earth was out there somewhere, spinning peacefully around its yellow sun. Her home, her world, the place where she had grown up and learned to dream of the cosmos. But now those dreams felt different, darker. Earth was not just her home. It was a secret, a mystery that the entire galaxy had agreed to keep hidden. And whatever that secret was, Kira knew it would change everything. She closed her eyes and made a promise to herself. She would find the truth. No matter how long it took, no matter how dangerous it became, she would discover why the oldest species in the galaxy was afraid of a small blue planet called Earth. She had no idea how much she would regret that promise. 6 months passed before Kira found her next clue. It came in the form of a dying species called the Keth Mori. The Keth Mori were ancient. Not as old as the Velthrani, but close. They had been traveling the stars for over 2 billion years. Their civilization had risen and fallen, and risen again countless times, and now, finally, they were fading away. Their population had shrunk to less than 10,000. Their homeworld was cold and quiet. Their cities stood empty, filled with memories of a glory that would never return. In a few hundred years, the Keth Mori would be gone completely. But they did not seem sad about this. They accepted their end with a peace that Kira found both beautiful and terrifying. What made the Keth Mori special was their memory. They remembered everything. Every war, every peace, every secret whispered in the dark corners of the galaxy. They were the keepers of history, the living archives of the cosmos. Kira traveled to their dying world alone. Her ship landed on a platform covered in dust and fallen leaves. No one came to greet her. She walked through empty streets until she found the Great Library, a building so large that it had its own weather system inside. The archivist was waiting for her. He was old, incredibly old. His skin glowed with soft bioluminescent light, but the glow was weak and flickering like a candle about to go out. His eyes were huge and dark, filled with the weight of countless millennia. When he spoke, his voice was like wind through dead trees. "I knew you would come," he said. "I have been waiting for a human to ask the question." It was only a matter of time. Kira stepped closer. The air in the library smelled like ancient books and dying flowers. "You know why I'm here?" "Yes." The archivist nodded slowly. "You want to know about the Velthrani. You want to know why they fear your world." "Everyone refuses to tell me," Kira said. "They act like Earth is some kind of monster, like my planet is dangerous. But we're just humans. We only discovered space travel 100 years ago. What could we possibly do to scare a species that has existed for billions of years? The archivist was silent for a long moment. His bioluminescent skin flickered and dimmed. Finally, he gestured for Kira to sit beside him. Your world was not always called Earth, he began. We had another name for it, a name that has been forbidden for 3 billion years. We called it Velcora. Velcora, Kira repeated. What does that mean? In the old tongue of the Velthrani, it means the wound. Some also translate it as the place where they sleep. Kira felt a chill run down her spine. Where? Who sleeps? What are you talking about? The archivist closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were filled with something that looked like grief. The Velthrani were not merely the first species to travel the stars, he said. They were the first species to exist at all. When the universe was young and empty, they arose. They were alone for billions of years. Can you imagine that loneliness? Human, being the only intelligent life in all of existence? Kira shook her head. She could not imagine it. In their loneliness, the Velthrani did something remarkable. The archivist continued. They created life. They seeded the galaxy with the building blocks of existence. Every species you have met, every world you have visited, exists because the Velthrani made it so. They are the gardeners of the cosmos, the parents of us all. That's incredible, Kira whispered. But what does this have to do with Earth? The archivist's glow dimmed even further. On your world, they did something different, something they have regretted ever since. They did not merely plant the seeds of life, they tried to create something greater, something perfect, something godlike. Kira's mouth went dry. What do you mean? They called it Athmora, the first child. It was meant to be a companion, an equal, a being of pure thought and infinite potential. For a brief moment, it was beautiful. The most beautiful thing in all of creation. The archivist paused. His hands trembled. And then it went wrong, he said. Athmora was too powerful, too hungry. It began to feed on reality itself. Stars died in its wake. Planets crumbled into dust. The Velthrani watched in horror as their perfect creation tried to unmake the universe. What happened? Kira asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper. They fought it. For 1,000 years, the Velthrani battled their own child. Billions of them died. Entire solar systems were destroyed. The war left scars on the fabric of space that still exist today. Black holes, pulsars, the strange empty places where nothing can live. The archivist looked directly at Kira. His eyes seemed to pierce through her. In the end, they could not kill it. Athmora was too strong, so they did the only thing they could. They trapped it. They built a prison beneath the surface of a small, wet planet at the edge of the galaxy. They buried their god under miles of rock and water, and then they fled. Kira's heart was pounding. Earth. They buried it on Earth. Yes, but a prison is useless without guards. The Velthrani needed something to keep Athmora contained. Something that could watch over the prison for billions of years. Something that could fight back if the god tried to escape. Understanding hit Kira like a physical blow. Humans. They created humans. The archivist nodded. You were engineered from their own genetic code. Simplified, limited, made less than what they were. But you were given one crucial trait. Chaos. Your minds are unpredictable. Your wills are stubborn. Your species generates a kind of psychic noise that disrupts Athmora's dreams. We're jailers, Kira said. We're prison guards, and we never even knew it. Yes, and you were designed to forget. The Velthrani removed your memories, your history, everything that connected you to them. They wanted you to live in ignorance. They believed it was safer that way. Kira stood up. Her legs felt weak. Why are you telling me this? Everyone else refused. The archivist smiled sadly. Because my species is dying, and we have nothing left to fear. And because you deserve to know the truth. Your people have been carrying this burden for 3 billion years without even knowing it. That seems unfair to me. What am I supposed to do with this information? That is for you to decide. The archivist's glow flickered again. He was running out of time. But I must warn you, human. The prison is not as strong as it once was. Athmora stirs in its sleep. The dreams grow darker. The walls grow thin. He reached out and touched Kira's hand. His skin was cold. And you are changing too, he whispered. Generation by generation, Your species becomes more than what it was designed to be. The limits the Velthrani placed on you are failing. Soon, you will begin to remember. And when you remember, the god will feel it. Kira pulled her hand away. What do you mean we're changing? But the archivist had closed his eyes. His bioluminescent skin went dark. For a moment, Kira thought he had died. Then she heard him breathing, slow and shallow. Go home, human, he murmured. Look at your own kind with new eyes. The answer is in your blood. It has always been in your blood. Kira left the great library in a daze. She walked back to her ship through the empty streets of the dying world. Above her, the stars seemed different now. Colder, more dangerous. She had come looking for answers. She had found them. But now she wished she had never asked the question. Earth was not just her home. It was a prison. And humanity was not just a species. They were chains. Living chains designed to hold back a god. And somewhere in the deep places of her world, that god was waking up. Kira started her ship and set a course for home. She needed to find proof. She needed to understand what was happening to her species. And most of all, she needed to know if there was any way to stop what was coming. The stars blurred around her as she jumped to hyperspace. The journey home had never felt so long. Dr. Elena Vasquez had not slept in 4 days. Her eyes burned. Her hands shook from too much coffee. The data on her screen made no sense, but she kept staring at it anyway. She kept hoping she was wrong. She was not wrong. Ambassador Kira Vance had returned from her journey with a story that sounded like madness. Ancient gods, cosmic prisons, humanity as engineered guards. Elena had listened politely and tried not to laugh. She was a scientist. She believed in facts, not fairy tales. But then Kira had given her the Velthrani genetic samples. Somehow, the ambassador had convinced the council to provide them. Elena had expected to prove Kira wrong. She had expected to show that humans and Velthrani were completely different species with no connection at all. Instead, she had found the truth. And the truth was terrifying. This is impossible, she whispered to herself for the 100th time. This cannot be real. But the data did not care about what was possible. The data simply told the truth. Human DNA and Velthrani DNA were not just similar. They were connected. Humans had been built from Velthrani genetic code. The evidence was clear and undeniable. Markers, patterns, sequences that could not have evolved naturally. Humans had been engineered, designed, created. Elena leaned back in her chair and rubbed her tired eyes. Kira's story was true. All of it. Humanity really was an artificial species, created billions of years ago to serve as prison guards for a sleeping god. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what Elena had found hidden in the human genome. Dormant genes, locked potential, abilities that had been deliberately switched off by the Velthrani when they created humanity. The list was almost impossible to believe. Telepathy, telekinesis, the ability to see into other dimensions, the power to manipulate reality itself. The Velthrani had not just created humans. They had created weakened versions of themselves. They had taken their own godlike powers and locked them away, hidden deep in human DNA where they would never be activated. Or at least, that was the plan. Elena called Kira and asked her to come to the laboratory immediately. An hour later, the ambassador stood beside her, looking at the same data on the screen. Tell me what I'm seeing, Kira said. Her face was pale. You were right, Elena said. About everything. We are descendants of the Velthrani. They created us from their own genetic material. And the locked abilities? The archivist said we were limited, made less than what we could be. Elena nodded and pointed to a section of the display. Here. These sequences contain instructions for abilities that humans should not have. Psychic powers, reality manipulation, things that belong in science fiction, not biology. But they're turned off, Kira said. They were turned off. Elena's voice was grim. Past tense. Look at this. She brought up a new display. It showed human DNA samples from different time periods. The oldest samples came from ancient bones found by archaeologists. The newest samples came from children born in the last decade. Do you see the difference? Elena asked. Kira studied the display. At first, she saw nothing. Then her eyes widened. The locked genes. They're changing. They're unlocking, Elena corrected. Slowly. Generation by generation. The locks the Velthrani put in place are breaking down. Each new generation of humans is slightly more than the one before. How is that possible? The Velthrani are supposed to be billions of years more advanced than us. How can their work fail? Elena shook her head. I don't know. Maybe nothing lasts forever. Not even the work of gods. Maybe the universe itself is pushing back against artificial limits. Or maybe... She hesitated. Maybe what? Maybe it's not an accident. Maybe something is helping the process along. Something that wants the locks to break. They both fell silent. The meaning was clear. Athmora, the sleeping god. Perhaps its dreams were reaching into human DNA, slowly unlocking the chains that held it prisoner. Over the following weeks, Elena expanded her research. She tested thousands of people from all over the world. The results were consistent. Everywhere she looked, she found evidence of changing DNA. The locked genes were activating at different rates in different people, but the direction was always the same. Humanity was evolving. Humanity was becoming more. Some people showed early signs of abilities. A young girl in Brazil who always knew when people were lying. A teenager in Japan who could sometimes move small objects without touching them. An old man in Canada who dreamed of places he had never visited and later recognized them in photographs. These cases were rare and weak, barely noticeable. Most people dismissed them as coincidence or imagination. But Elena knew the truth. These were the first sparks of something much larger. She presented her findings to a secret committee of world leaders and scientists. The room was tense as she explained what she had discovered. When she finished, no one spoke for a long time. What does this mean for humanity? One of the leaders finally asked. It means we have a choice, Elena said. We can try to stop the unlocking process, find a way to reinforce the limits in our DNA, keep humanity as we are, keep the prison intact, or, another leader asked, or we let it happen. We allow ourselves to evolve. We become what the Velthrani were afraid we would become. And what happens to the prison if we evolve? Kira asked. She already knew the answer, but she wanted everyone else to hear it. Elena took a deep breath. The prison depends on our limited minds, our chaos, our psychic noise. If we become more focused, more powerful, more like the Velthrani, the noise will stop. The dreams will clear, and Athmora will wake up. The room exploded into argument. Some leaders demanded that the evolution be stopped at all costs. Others argued that humanity had the right to reach its full potential. Several people simply sat in shocked silence, unable to process what they had heard. Kira watched the chaos and thought about the archivist's words. The prison was already weakening. The god was already stirring. Perhaps it was too late to stop anything. That night, she stood on the roof of the research facility and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Velthrani were watching, waiting. They had run away from their mistake 3 billion years ago and left humanity to deal with it. But humanity had never been given a choice. They had been created as tools, as guards, as living chains. They had spent their entire existence not knowing who they really were. Maybe it was time to find out. Elena joined her on the roof. The scientist looked exhausted but determined. I've been thinking, Elena said. The Velthrani locked our abilities because they were afraid of what we might become. They assumed we would be just like them, just as arrogant, just as foolish. You think they were wrong? I think humans are different. We've spent billions of years struggling, suffering, fighting against impossible odds. We've faced extinction countless times and survived. We're not like the Velthrani. We're stronger, harder, more stubborn. Kira nodded slowly. What are you suggesting? Elena looked at her with fierce determination. The Velthrani couldn't kill their god. They could only trap it. But maybe they were the wrong ones for the job. Maybe they were too gentle, too careful, too civilized. And humans? Elena smiled. It was not a kind smile. Humans have been killing monsters since we crawled out of caves with stone tools. It's what we do. It's who we are. Kira felt something stir inside her. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. You want to fight it. The god. You want to fight Athmora. I want to give humanity the choice. Elena said. We were designed to be less. But that doesn't mean we have to accept it. Let's find out what we can really do. Above them, the stars burned cold and distant. And far below, in the darkest depths of the ocean, something ancient felt the first tremors of fear. The chains were waking up, and they were starting to remember what they really were. The message arrived without warning. It came directly to Earth, bypassing all normal communication channels. Every screen on the planet displayed the same words at the same moment. Phones, computers, televisions, even digital billboards in city centers, all showed the same message. It was written in a language that no human had ever seen before. Yet somehow, everyone who looked at it understood perfectly. We are the Velthrani. We must speak. The coordinates are 11.349, 3 degrees north, 142.1996 degrees east, 7 miles below the floor. You know what lies there. We know you have begun to remember. Time grows short. The dreamer stirs. The coordinates pointed to a spot in the Pacific Ocean, the Mariana Trench, the deepest place on Earth. But the message said 7 miles below the floor. That was impossible. The deepest point of the trench was only 7 miles from the surface. There could be nothing below the floor itself, unless the floor was not really the floor. Kira and Elena led the expedition. They gathered the best scientists, engineers, and military personnel from every nation. The world's governments, for once, worked together without argument. The message from the Velthrani had made the danger clear. Whatever was coming, it was coming for everyone. They built a special vessel. It was designed to survive pressures that would crush normal submarines like paper cups. It could drill through solid rock. It could operate in complete darkness for months at a time. The descent took 3 days. First came the familiar darkness of the deep ocean. Fish with glowing bodies swam past the vessel's lights. Strange creatures that had never seen the sun drifted through the black water. Then came the floor of the trench, a desert of mud and ancient stone. And then they went deeper. The drill cut through rock that had not been disturbed in billions of years. Layer after layer of stone and metal and materials that the scientists could not identify. Elena watched the readings on her screens with growing wonder. This was not natural geology. This was construction. Someone had built this place. We're passing through some kind of barrier, she announced. The density readings are off the charts. This material is stronger than anything we've ever seen. How are we cutting through it? Kira asked. We're not. It's letting us through. The barrier is opening ahead of our drill and closing behind us. A chill ran through the vessel. The barrier was alive. Or at least, it was controlled by something that was watching them approach. 7 miles below the floor, they found it. The chamber was vast. So vast that their lights could not reach the walls or ceiling. It seemed to stretch forever in all directions, a darkness so complete that it felt solid. The vessel floated in empty space, surrounded by nothing. No, not nothing. Something was here. Something massive. The lights found it slowly. First, they saw what might have been a hand, but it was too large, too wrong. The fingers had too many joints. The skin shifted colors in ways that hurt to look at. Then the lights moved higher and found an arm, a shoulder, a body. Athmora was beautiful. That was the first thought that entered Kira's mind. It was beautiful in the way that a storm is beautiful, in the way that a star going supernova is beautiful. Beauty without mercy, beauty without safety. The being was humanoid in shape, but only barely. It seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Parts of its body folded in on themselves in impossible ways. Looking at it too long caused headaches and nosebleeds. Several crew members had to leave the observation deck because their eyes could not process what they were seeing. It was sleeping. Its eyes were closed. Its chest rose and fell with breaths that took hours to complete. Energy fields surrounded it, holding it in place, suspending it in the heart of the prison, and it was dreaming. The dreams leaked out of its mind like radiation from a reactor. The crew could feel them pressing against their thoughts. Strange images, alien concepts, memories of a time before time. When the universe was young and empty and waiting to be shaped, Dr. Marcus Chen was the first to break. He started screaming and could not stop. He clawed at his own eyes, trying to unsee what he had seen. The medical team sedated him and carried him away. But his screams echoed through the vessel for hours. 2 more crew members followed. They did not scream. They simply walked to the airlock and tried to open it. They wanted to go outside. They wanted to be closer to the beautiful thing in the darkness. Security stopped them, but their eyes remained empty and distant for days afterward. "We need to leave," Elena said. Her voice shook. "This thing is too dangerous. Just being near it is killing us." But before they could turn the vessel around, The communication system crackled to life. A voice filled the chamber. It was speaking from orbit. The Velthrani had come. "You see now," the voice said. "You understand what we have tried to contain for 3 billion years." Kira grabbed the communication device. "Why didn't you kill it? You had billions of years. Why is it still alive?" "We tried." The Velthrani voice was heavy with ancient grief. "For 1,000 years, we tried. Athmora cannot be killed. It is not truly alive in the way you understand. It is a thought, an idea, a concept, given form. You cannot kill an idea. You can only trap it, contain it, hope that it forgets how to escape. But the prison is failing," Elena said. "We've seen the changes in human DNA. The locks are breaking. Yes, we designed you to be the perfect guards. Simple, chaotic. Your minds create static that disrupts the dreamer's thoughts. But we made you too well. You are adaptable. You evolve. You become more than what you were meant to be. So this is our fault?" Kira demanded. "For growing? For changing? No. The fault is ours. We were arrogant. We thought we could create perfection. Instead, we created destruction. And then we ran away. We left you here to clean up our mistake, and we never even told you what you were guarding." The Velthrani voice paused. When it continued, it sounded almost ashamed. "We are sorry. We have watched you from afar for billions of years. We have seen you suffer and struggle and die. We told ourselves it was necessary. We told ourselves there was no other way. But we were cowards. We were afraid." "What happens now?" Kira asked. "What happens when the locks fully break? When we become what you were afraid of? Then the static will fade. The dreamer will wake, and Athmora will finish what it started 3 billion years ago. It will unmake the universe, one star at a time, until nothing remains but itself." Elena stared at the sleeping god. Its chest rose and fell. Its dreams pressed against her mind. She could feel its hunger, even through the barriers. It wanted to wake up. It wanted to be free. It wanted to consume everything that existed. "There has to be another way," she said. "There has to be something we can do. There is not. We have studied this problem for 3 billion years. The prison will fail. The god will wake. The only question is when." But Kira was not listening to the despair in the Velthrani voice. She was watching Athmora's face, and for just a moment, she thought she saw something there. Something that should not exist in a being of infinite power. It looked like fear. The god was dreaming of something. Something that made it afraid. And Kira realized that humans were not just in those dreams. They were the cause of them. "You're wrong," she said quietly. "There is another way. You just never considered it because you couldn't imagine anyone actually trying." "What do you mean?" Kira smiled. It was a cold smile. A human smile. "You tried to kill it and failed. You tried to imprison it, and that's failing too. But you never tried to do what humans do best." "And what is that?" "Make it wish it had never been born." The communication line went silent. Far below, in the depths of its ancient prison, Athmora shifted in its sleep, and somewhere in its endless dreams, a new feeling began to grow. Uncertainty. The truth spread across Earth like fire through dry grass. Within days, every human alive knew the story. They learned about the Velthrani and the prison beneath the ocean. They learned that humanity had been created as guards for a sleeping god. They learned that the chains were breaking and that Athmora would soon wake. Some people panicked. Cities burned as fear turned to violence. Others fell into despair, believing that nothing could be done. Many turned to religion, seeking comfort in faiths that suddenly seemed very small compared to the truth. But others felt something different, something unexpected. They felt angry. For billions of years, humanity had suffered. They had fought wars and diseases and natural disasters. They had clawed their way up from the mud through sheer stubborn will. They had believed they were alone in the universe, struggling against an uncaring cosmos. Now they learned it was all by design. The Velthrani had created them to suffer, to fight, to struggle, and then those creators had run away, leaving humanity to face an impossible enemy without even knowing it existed. The anger grew. It spread from person to person like a virus. It connected people who had nothing else in common. Rich and poor, young and old, enemies who had fought for generations. They all felt the same burning rage at what had been done to them. And with the anger came the changes. The locked genes that Elena had discovered began activating faster. Much faster. It was as if the collective fury of 8 billion people was pushing evolution into overdrive. People who had never shown any special abilities suddenly found themselves reading minds or moving objects with their thoughts. Children who were born during those weeks came into the world already awake, their eyes glowing with power they should not possess. The Velthrani watched from orbit in growing terror. Their own genetic locks were failing faster than they had ever predicted. Humanity was not just evolving, it was exploding into something new. Ambassador Kira Vance stood before the full Galactic Council. All 18 seats were occupied. For the first time in 3 billion years, the Velthrani had sent a representative to sit among the other species. He was ancient and powerful, his body radiating energy that made the air shimmer around him. But his eyes were filled with fear. "You asked for this meeting," High Arbiter Thesson said. "What do you wish to say to the Council?" "Ambassador Vance?" Kira looked around the chamber. She saw 17 species that had hidden the truth from humanity. 17 civilizations that had agreed to keep Earth isolated and ignorant. Some looked ashamed, others looked afraid. A few looked curious about what this angry human would say. 3 billion years ago, the Velthrani made a mistake. Kira began. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath the words. They created something they could not control. And when it almost destroyed the universe, they ran away. They created my species to clean up their mess. They made us small and weak and ignorant. They left us alone on a prison world and never told us why we existed. She paused and looked directly at the Velthrani representative. "You made us to be less," she said. "You crippled us before we were even born. You wrote limits into our very blood because you were afraid of what we might become. And now those limits are breaking. Your prison is failing, and you still expect us to fix your problem." The Velthrani lowered his ancient head. "Yes," he admitted. "We were wrong. We were cowards. We deserve your anger." "You deserve more than anger," Kira said. "But that's not why I called this meeting." She turned to address the full council. The Velthrani believe that when humanity fully awakens, the prison will fail. Athmora will escape and destroy the universe. They see no hope. They have been studying this problem for 3 billion years and found no solution. "Is there a solution?" Thesson asked. Kira smiled. It was not a gentle smile. The Velthrani made a mistake when they created us. They copied their own nature and then tried to limit it. They thought they were making something weaker, something safer, something that could contain their god without threatening the galaxy. And they were wrong, Elena said from her seat in the observer section. "They didn't make us weaker. They made us different." Kira nodded. "Humans have spent billions of years fighting for survival. We evolved on a world filled with predators and disasters and 1,000 ways to die. We learned to kill before we learned to farm. We learned to hate before we learned to love. Every step of our existence has been a battle against something trying to destroy us." She looked at the Velthrani again. "You couldn't kill Athmora because you were too much like it. You created it from your own minds. It understood you. It knew how you thought, how you fought, how you dreamed. But humans are different. We don't fight like you. We don't think like you. We don't dream like you." "What are you saying?" the Velthrani asked. "I'm saying that you made us to be guards. You made us to keep your god asleep, but you built us from the wrong parts of yourself. You gave us your violence without your wisdom, your stubbornness without your patience, your rage without your calm." Kira's eyes began to glow. Just slightly, but everyone in the chamber noticed. When Athmora dreams of you, it sees a parent, an equal, something it can understand. But when it dreams of us, it sees something else entirely. It sees monsters, creatures that fight without reason, things that break everything they touch, including themselves. We terrify it in ways you never could." The chamber fell silent. "You tried to imprison your god," Kira said. "You failed. You tried to make guards who would never threaten it. You failed at that too. Instead, you made something worse than Athmora ever imagined." She stepped forward, and the glow in her eyes grew brighter. "You made us, and now we're waking up. Not to guard your prison, not to maintain your chains. We're waking up to do what we've always done. To fight, to struggle, to defeat anything that threatens our existence, no matter how powerful it might be." The Velthrani stood. His ancient body trembled. "You cannot defeat Athmora. It is beyond anything you can imagine." Maybe, Kira admitted. Or maybe you just never had the right tools for the job. You were gardeners trying to kill a weed. We're not gardeners. We're exterminators, and we've been practicing on each other for billions of years. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Tell your species something from humanity, she said. Tell them that the chains are breaking. Tell them that the guards are becoming something else. But don't tell them to be afraid for the universe. She smiled one last time. Tell them to be afraid for the god. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a prison that had held for 3 billion years, Athmora stirred in its sleep. Its dreams, which had always been filled with hunger and conquest, now contained something new. It dreamed of small creatures with burning eyes, creatures that did not run when they saw its power, creatures that smiled as they sharpened their weapons, creatures that whispered a single word over and over again. Finally, the god shifted in its chains. For the first time since its imprisonment, it tried to sink deeper into sleep. It tried to hide in its own dreams, because it could feel what was coming. 8 billion minds were waking up. 8 billion fires were burning brighter. The chains were not just breaking, they were transforming, and what they were becoming was far more terrifying than anything the Velthrani had ever imagined. Above the ocean, humanity looked up at the stars. They knew the truth now. They knew what they were. They knew what was coming. And they were ready, not because they had hope, not because they had faith, but because they had something far more dangerous. They had rage, and for the first time in 3 billion years, the god beneath the waves felt something it had never experienced before: fear of its prey.